The morning Austin sun cast sharp shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Innovate Tech's downtown headquarters. As I settled into what I didn't yet know would be my final team meeting, coffee steam rose from my mug, the one Sophie had given me last Christmas with Code Queen emblazoned in fading gold letters. Around the polished conference table, my colleagues shuffled through printouts, while CEO Evan Caldwell's voice droned about quarterly projections. The DataSync platform continues to exceed expectations. Evan announced, his practiced smile sweeping the room. Our data optimization algorithm has become the backbone of enterprise solutions across 3 continents. My algorithm, the correction formed silently in my mind as it had countless times over the past 17 years. I'd learned early in my career that claiming credit too loudly made men uncomfortable, and uncomfortable men had power to make careers disappear. So I'd perfected the art of strategic invisibility, brilliant enough to be indispensable, quiet enough to avoid threatening egos. But at 57, I was discovering that invisibility could become literal. Elena, Evan's voice cut through my thoughts. Perhaps you could walk us through the performance metrics. I stood clicking through slides that represented months of my unpaid overtime evenings, stolen from family dinners, weekends, sacrificed to perfect what would become Innovate Tech's crown jewel. The algorithm's elegance lay not in its complexity, but in its simplicity, a breakthrough that had taken me 3 years to achieve, and Evan 30 seconds to brand as our company's innovative approach. As I spoke, I noticed Cassandra Reed, my direct supervisor, exchanging glances with HR Director Lydia Foster. Quick, meaningful looks that carried the weight of decisions already made. My presentation concluded to polite nods and distracted murmurs. The meeting dissolved into sidebar conversations, from which I found myself naturally excluded. Walking back to my office, a modest corner space overlooking the Colorado River, I tried to shake off the familiar sensation of being simultaneously essential and invisible. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Sophie's science fair is tonight. Don't forget the video camera." A pang of guilt twisted in my stomach. How many school events had I missed for late-night debugging sessions? How many family dinners had grown cold while I chased perfection in lines of code? The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent decades building Innovate Tech's future, only to realize I'd mortgaged my own. That afternoon, Cassie's email arrived with the sterile efficiency of corporate communication. "Elena, please see me in conference room B at 4:30. Lydia will be joining us to discuss your career development opportunities." Career development. The euphemism landed like ice in my chest. In 17 years at Innovate Tech, I'd learned that HR attended meetings about opportunities, rarely delivered what they promised. I spent the remaining hours organizing my desk, a ritual that felt suspiciously like preparation for departure. Family photos, Sophie at various ages, Nathan and me at last year's company picnic, watched from their frames as I sorted through code printouts and technical documentation. Everything I'd built reduced to manila folders and post-it notes. Conference room B felt arctic despite the Texas heat outside. Cassie sat rigid at the head of the table, her manicured fingers drumming against a folder thick enough to contain severance paperwork. Lydia occupied the adjacent chair, clipboard balanced on her lap, wearing the expression of someone delivering necessary unpleasantness. "Elena, thank you for coming." Cassie began, her tone carrying the false warmth of practiced corporate speak. "We've been reviewing departmental restructuring, and I'm afraid your position has been identified for elimination." The words hit like physical blows, each one landing with surgical precision. Position eliminated. Restructuring, nothing personal. The language of disposability wrapped in professional courtesy. We're consolidating research and development under the product team, Lydia added, sliding the folder across the table. Your contributions have been valued, but the company is moving in a new direction. I opened the folder with steady hands, scanning severance terms that reduced 17 years of innovation to weeks of pay and months of health insurance. Career counseling services were listed alongside legal disclaimers, the bureaucratic poetry of endings. I understand, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. These decisions are never easy. What they couldn't see, what their practiced expressions of regret concealed, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. Not preparing to be fired, but preparing to fight back. The signs had been accumulating like storm clouds, patent applications filed without my name, meeting invitations that mysteriously disappeared from my calendar, conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the careful orchestration of my erasure conducted by people who'd underestimated both my technical skills and my capacity for strategic thinking. 3 weeks earlier, while helping a junior developer troubleshoot server issues, I'd stumbled across a shared drive folder labeled Organizational Planning. The document inside had been a masterclass in corporate betrayal, detailed plans to claim my algorithm as company-developed technology, eliminate my position before patent approval, and redistribute my responsibilities among younger, cheaper engineers. Evan's notes had been particularly illuminating. Elena's contributions valuable but replaceable. Age demographic not aligned with company image. Cassie's response had been even colder. Agreed, transition should be seamless. She won't see it coming. But they'd miscalculated. I wasn't just a coder who'd stumbled into management. I was a problem solver who'd spent decades navigating corporate politics. And I'd learned something crucial. The best defense against systematic erasure was meticulous preparation. While they'd been planning my professional execution, I'd been building my escape route. The algorithm they intended to steal lived in multiple versions across my personal devices, each iteration documented with timestamps and development logs that proved individual contribution. My employment contract retrieved from dusty file boxes in our Westlake Hills home contained clauses protecting intellectual property, developed outside company resources. Most importantly, I'd cultivated relationships with people who valued competence over demographics. Marcus Tate from Nexus Dynamics had been pursuing me for months, recognizing what Innovate Tech had chosen to overlook, that innovation doesn't age out at 50. Our conversations conducted in dive bars and coffee shops, far from corporate eyes, had evolved from professional courtesy to strategic planning. Marcus understood that acquiring my algorithm meant acquiring a competitive advantage that could reshape market dynamics. We'll make this transition as smooth as possible, Cassie was saying, her words floating through my strategic calculations. Friday will be your last day. I stood straightening my jacket with deliberate care. From my bag, I withdrew a sealed black envelope and placed it on the table between us. Please ensure Evan receives this when he returns from his conference. I said, my voice carrying the steady authority of someone who'd already moved beyond their current circumstances. The envelope contained more than my resignation. It contained the opening move in a game they didn't yet know they were playing. Walking out of Innovate Tech's glass towers that evening, I felt the weight of 17 years lifting from my shoulders. The Austin skyline blazed in the setting sun, painting the city in shades of possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Nexus legal team standing by, ready when you are. I typed back, let's begin. The drive home to Westlake Hills took me through neighborhoods where live oaks created tunnels of green shadow, their branches heavy with Spanish moss that swayed in the evening breeze. The familiar landscape felt different now, not like territory I was leaving, but like ground I was preparing to reclaim on better terms. Sophie met me at the front door, her robotics project scattered across the entryway table in an explosion of wires and creativity. At 16, she'd inherited my analytical mind and Nathan's social confidence, a combination that made her formidable in ways I was still learning to appreciate. "Mom, you look weird," she said, studying my face with the directness that made parenting both challenging and rewarding. "Good weird, though, like you know something nobody else does." "Maybe I do," I said, pulling her into a hug that lasted longer than usual. Nathan emerged from the kitchen dish towel, slung over his shoulder, wearing the expression of someone who'd learned to read the subtle communications of long marriage. He saw the combination of exhaustion and exhilaration in my posture, the way triumph and grief could occupy the same emotional space. "They let you go," he said, not asking. "They tried to." Lenimo over dinner Nathan's legendary chili that had become our family's comfort food, I explained the day's events and the weeks of preparation that had preceded them. Sophie listened with the intensity she usually reserved for complex programming problems, asking questions that revealed both her technical understanding and her protective instincts. "So you're going to sue them?" she asked, twirling pasta around her fork with aggressive precision. "Among other things," I said. "But first we're going to show them what they actually lost." Nathan reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "What do you need from us?" The question was pure, Nathan practical, supportive, focused on solutions rather than problems. After 22 years of marriage, he understood that my professional challenges were family challenges, that supporting my career meant supporting our shared future. "Patience," I said. "The next few weeks are going to be intense. There might be lawyers, reporters, industry drama. But when it's over, we'll be better than before." Sophie grinned the expression, transforming her from concerned daughter to co-conspirator. "Can I help? I know Python and JavaScript, and I'm really good at finding things people try to hide online." "Absolutely not," I said, then added with a smile. "But I appreciate the offer." That night, after Sophie had retreated to her room and Nathan had settled into his evening routine of reviewing marketing campaigns, I sat in my home office with my personal laptop, the one I'd purchased years ago, specifically to keep my work separate from Innovate Tech's systems. The algorithm displayed on the screen represented 3 years of innovation, hundreds of hours of unpaid overtime, and the solution to data optimization problems that had stumped entire development teams. It was also according to corporate documents I wasn't supposed to have seen, about to become someone else's achievement. I opened a new document and began typing not code this time, but strategy. Marcus had introduced me to Clara Bennett, an intellectual property attorney whose reputation for aggressive client advocacy had made her both feared and respected in Austin's legal community. Clara had spent the past week reviewing my employment contract development documentation and the evidence of Innovate Tech's theft that I'd carefully accumulated. Her preliminary assessment had been encouraging. "They've overplayed their hand, Elena. Patent law is complex, but employment law is straightforward. You can't steal what you don't own, and they never owned your individual innovations. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. Paperwork filed. Your patent application is in the system as of 6 p.m. today. Innovate Tech's going to wake up Monday morning to a very different world. I smiled, saving the strategic document I'd been creating. The file name read Project Reset, a private joke about debugging corporate mistakes. Friday morning arrived with typical Austin intensity, the sun already aggressive by 7 a.m., as I drove downtown for my final day as an Innovate Tech employee. The ritual of badge access elevator rides and hallway navigation felt surreal, like visiting a place I'd once lived but no longer belonged. My desk had been cleared the night before, personal items packed into boxes that now sat in Nathan's SUV. What remained were the tools of corporate life company, laptop security badge, the accumulated detritus of institutional belonging. I powered up the laptop for the last time, smiling as I deleted browsing history and cleared cached files. Let them puzzle over the gaps. Miguel Santos, my lead developer, and the closest thing I had to a corporate protege, stopped by around 10 a.m. with coffee and the nervous energy of someone who understood that organizational changes rippled outward from their epicenter. "This is bullshit, Elena," he said, settling into the visitor chair with the casual irreverence that made him both effective and occasionally problematic. 17 years and they're just done with you. They think they are. I said, accepting the coffee with genuine gratitude. Miguel was 28, brilliant, and still young enough to believe that competence guaranteed job security. But sometimes people mistake the end of one thing for the end of everything. Cryptic much. He studied my face, searching for clues. "You're planning something." "I'm planning everything." I leaned back in my chair, savoring both the coffee and the moment. "Miguel, you've been a good friend and a better colleague. When this is over, I'm going to remember who stood by me." When what's over, before I could answer my phone, buzzed with a text from Marcus. Nexus board approved terms. Contract ready for signature. Press release drafted for Monday morning. I finished my coffee and stood straightening my jacket with the same deliberate care I'd shown in Conference Room B. The endgame was approaching, and timing would be everything. Elena Miguel was still waiting for an answer. "Watch the news Monday," I said, logging out of my Innovate Tech account for the final time. "And Miguel, start updating your resume. I have a feeling there are going to be some interesting opportunities opening up." The weekend passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Saturday brought a meeting with Clara at a quiet cafe near Ladybird Lake, where we reviewed the final details of legal strategy while tourists paddled kayaks in the background. The irony wasn't lost on me, planning corporate warfare in one of Austin's most peaceful settings. "They'll try to claim the algorithm was developed using company resources," Clara said, spreading documents across our small table. "But your employment contract is clear about intellectual property created outside work parameters, and you've documented everything perfectly." Sunday was family time. Sophie's robotics competition at the convention center, where her team's project earned second place, and her proud grin earned the video footage Nathan had promised to capture. Watching her accept the award, I felt the weight of example setting. Sophie would grow up in a world where women's contributions were increasingly recognized, but recognition required fighting for it. "Mom, did you see the look on Jimmy Martinez's face when they announced our team?" Sophie bounced in the passenger seat as we drove home, her medal catching afternoon sunlight. He totally thought his robot was going to win just because it was bigger. "Bigger isn't always better," I said, thinking about corporate hierarchies and algorithmic elegance. Sometimes the most powerful solutions are the ones people underestimate. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability and the energy of new beginnings. I dressed carefully, charcoal suit, conservative jewelry, the professional armor of someone about to declare war on former allies. Nathan kissed me goodbye with the solemnity of someone sending a soldier into battle. "Go show them what they lost," he said. The Nexus Dynamics offices occupied a sleek building in South Austin, all glass and steel and modern confidence. The lobby buzzed with the energy of a company on the rise employees, moving with the purposeful stride of people building something significant. Marcus met me at the elevator, his smile carrying the satisfaction of someone about to execute a perfectly timed strategic move. "Legal finished the press release at midnight," he said as we rode to the executive floor. "Industry publications are standing by. This is going to create waves." My new office faced west toward the Colorado River floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a view that stretched across Austin's expanding skyline. The space felt like possibility made tangible, not just a workplace, but a platform for the next phase of professional life. At exactly 8 a.m., Marcus's assistant distributed the press release to a carefully curated list of technology publications, industry analysts, and financial reporters. The headline read, "Nexus Dynamics acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary data. Algorithm welcomes creator Elena Harper as Chief Technology Officer." The story that followed was both my professional biography and Innovate Tech's public humiliation. It detailed my 17 years of innovation, my role as the sole inventor of the data optimization technology that had driven their market success and the circumstances that had led to my departure. Most importantly, it announced that any company wishing to license my algorithm, including Innovate Tech, would now negotiate through Nexus Dynamics. My phone started ringing at 8:15 a.m. The first call came from TechCrunch, requesting an exclusive interview. The second from the Austin Business Journal, wanting comment on Innovate Tech's response. By 8:30, my voicemail was full, and my email inbox was exploding with interview requests, collaboration proposals, and messages of support from colleagues I'd worked with over nearly 2 decades in technology. At 8:45, Miguel texted, "Holy shit, Elena, Evan just called an emergency meeting. Everyone's freaking out." At 9 a.m., Clara called with an update. "Innovate Tech's legal team just contacted my office. They want to discuss amicable resolution." Translation, they're panicking. At 9:15, Innovate Tech's stock price dropped 12% in pre-market trading, but the call I'd been waiting for came at 9:30. Evan's name flashing on my phone screen with the persistence of desperation. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message with the satisfaction of someone who'd been underestimated by people who should have known better. "Elena, this is Evan. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we talk today? I'm sure we can work something out." I saved the message and sent it to Clara with a note. Evidence of acknowledgement. The morning dissolved into a series of strategic conversations with lawyers, reporters, and Nexus executives who were rapidly adjusting to the reality of suddenly owning Innovate Tech's competitive advantage. Marcus moved through the office with the controlled energy of someone executing a plan that was exceeding expectations. "We've had 3 major clients call already," he reported during our 11 a.m. strategy meeting. 2 want to expand their licenses, 1 wants to discuss exclusive partnership, and Elena, IBM's head of enterprise solutions, wants to schedule a call this afternoon. The validation was intoxicating, but I kept my focus on the larger objective. This wasn't just about professional revenge, it was about demonstrating that experience and competence couldn't be discarded without consequences. My phone buzzed with another text from Miguel. Cassie just announced temporary restructuring of development priorities. People are updating LinkedIn profiles. It's chaos. At noon, Nathan called to report that Sophie had seen the TechCrunch article and was basically vibrating with excitement. The image of my 16-year-old daughter celebrating my professional triumph felt like the validation I hadn't known I needed. "She wants to frame the article," Nathan said, laughter warming his voice. "Something about Mom the Badass going on her bulletin board." The afternoon brought the call I'd been anticipating with mixed emotions. Evan again, this time reaching me directly. "Elena." His voice carried the careful neutrality of someone navigating explosive territory. "I think we need to talk face to face." "I think we needed to talk 3 weeks ago," I replied, settling back in my new office chair. "But you were busy planning my elimination instead." The silence stretched long enough for me to imagine his reaction, the careful calculation of someone realizing that their strategic assumptions had been catastrophically wrong. "That's not, Elena, there were organizational pressures. The board was pushing for cost reduction, and your salary level made you a target. It wasn't personal." "It became personal the moment you decided to steal my work." "We can fix this," he said, desperation creeping into his carefully controlled tone. "Come back. CTO position equity package. Full attribution for your contributions. We can announce it as a promotion." I laughed, the sound carrying 17 years of accumulated frustration and newfound freedom. "Evan, do you understand what happened today? I don't work for you anymore. I work for your competitor, and tomorrow morning your board is going to realize that their cost-cutting measure just cost them their competitive advantage." "Elena." "Have a good afternoon, Evan. Send my regards to Cassie." I hung up and immediately called Clara to report the conversation. Her laughter matched my own. "Panic makes people stupid," she said. "That call just gave us everything we need for the civil suit. Acknowledgement of your contributions, admission of financial motivation for termination, and an offer that proves they know they acted improperly." "When do we file?" "Tomorrow morning, right after their stock opens and investors see the full impact of their mistake." Tuesday's headlines were everything I'd hoped for and more. Innovate Tech loses key patent holder to competitor, ran in the Wall Street Journal. Austin tech giant faces talent exodus after controversial firing, appeared in the Austin American-Statesman. Most satisfying was TechCrunch's analysis piece. How Innovate Tech's age bias cost them their competitive edge. The stock market's reaction was swift and decisive. Innovate Tech dropped another 8% at opening, while Nexus Dynamics gained 15% on news of the algorithm acquisition. By noon, the financial impact was clear. Innovate Tech had lost roughly $200 million in market value, while Nexus had gained $150 million, but the real victory came in the form of email messages flooding my inbox from women in technology who saw my story as validation of their own experiences. From older professionals who'd faced similar discrimination, from young engineers who were learning that competence and experience deserved respect regardless of demographics. Clara filed our civil suit at exactly 10 a.m., alleging wrongful termination, age discrimination, and intellectual property theft. The timing was surgical, just as Innovate Tech's executives were dealing with media fallout and investor panic. They now faced the prospect of extended legal proceedings that would keep their mistakes in public view. Miguel's updates continued to arrive throughout the day. 3 more people gave notice. HR is scheduling exit interviews like it's Black Friday. Evan locked himself in his office and hasn't come out. But the most satisfying message came from Sophie, texting during her lunch break. Mom, kids at school are talking about your TechCrunch interview. Jenny Morrison said her mom works in tech and thinks your goals. I'm so proud of you. The weeks that followed blurred together in a parade of interviews, legal meetings, and strategic planning sessions. The civil suit moved forward with the inexorable force of well-documented truth, while media coverage kept Innovate Tech's mistakes in public view. 3 more senior engineers left for competitors taking institutional knowledge and client relationships with them. Cassie resigned 2 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, citing personal reasons, while quietly accepting a position with a smaller firm in Seattle. Her LinkedIn profile scrubbed all references to Innovate Tech, a digital erasure that felt like its own form of justice. Evan lasted another month before the board decided that new leadership was needed to restore investor confidence. His severance package was substantial, but his reputation was damaged beyond repair. The last I heard, he was working for a mid-tier consulting firm in Dallas, learning what it felt like to start over at 55. Meanwhile, Nexus Dynamics thrived. The exclusive license to my algorithm opened doors with enterprise clients who had previously been locked into Innovate Tech's ecosystem. My team of engineers, several recruited from my former employer, worked with the energy of people building something significant rather than maintaining someone else's creation. But the most meaningful development was Harper Tech Solutions, the consulting firm I established in a converted warehouse space on South Congress. The mission was simple: help women and older professionals protect their intellectual property and navigate corporate politics. The client list grew quickly, data scientists fighting to reclaim stolen code, experienced engineers pushed out by restructuring, young women learning to document their contributions before they could be erased. Sophie visited the office regularly, ostensibly to help with filing, but actually to absorb lessons about standing up for yourself in professional settings. Her robotics team had evolved into a programming club that met in our conference room on weekends, their projects exploring everything from artificial intelligence to social media algorithms. "Mom," she said one Saturday afternoon, looking up from her laptop where she was debugging code for a peer tutoring app, "do you think I'll have to fight for credit like you did?" The question carried the weight of generational change and persistent challenges. "I hope not," I said, settling into the chair beside her. "But if you do, you'll be ready, and you'll have allies who understand what it means to fight smart." The civil suit settled 6 months after filing, the terms sealed, but the outcome satisfying. Innovate Tech agreed to public acknowledgement of my contributions, substantial financial compensation, and licensing terms that would generate royalties for years to come. More importantly, they implemented new policies regarding age discrimination and intellectual property attribution. The settlement announcement coincided with my keynote address at the National Women in Technology Summit in San Francisco, the same conference where I'd once sat in the audience, dreaming of the day when my contributions would be recognized. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces representing the next generation of women in technology, I felt the weight of example and the power of perseverance. "Your ideas have value," I told the audience, my voice carrying across the auditorium with the authority of someone who'd fought for that principle and won. Document them, protect them, and never let anyone convince you that experience is a liability. In technology, as in life, the most elegant solutions often come from those who've learned to think beyond conventional limitations. The applause was thunderous, but the real victory came afterward, in conversations with young engineers who were learning to advocate for themselves, with mid-career professionals planning strategic moves, with women who'd been invisible for too long and were finally ready to be seen. Driving home to Austin that night, watching the Texas landscape roll past under star-filled skies, I reflected on the journey from corporate invisibility to public recognition. The algorithm that had started everything lines of code representing thousands of hours of innovative thinking had become more than technical achievement. It had become proof that competence doesn't age out, that experience deserves respect, and that fighting smart sometimes means fighting publicly. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Sophie recorded your speech. She wants to show it to her programming class. Something about Mom the Legend." I smiled, accelerating toward home and the family that had supported every strategic move, every calculated risk, every moment of uncertainty that had led to this vindication. The Austin skyline appeared in the distance, familiar and welcoming, a landscape of possibility under Texas stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients for HarperTech Solutions, new opportunities to help others navigate the complexities of professional recognition. But tonight was for celebration, for family, for the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear. The algorithm had been the beginning, but the real innovation was learning to code for justice, to debug discrimination, and to program a future where experience and competence couldn't be erased by people who'd forgotten that wisdom often comes disguised as gray hair and laugh lines. In the end, Innovate Tech had taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. The most powerful code you can write is the one that writes you back into your own story. Miles rolled past, taking me home to family, to possibility, to the next chapter of a story that had just begun.